Number 10. Darwin. Darwin is one of the newest characters on this list, first appearing as retconned X-Men member in 2005's X-Men Deadly Genesis. He is Armando Munoz, who was sent to the island of Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men team alongside Vulcan, who was on our part 1 for this list, fun fact. Following the ultimate failure of that mission, Darwin was launched into space alongside Vulcan, and during M-Day ended up absorbing the energy expelled from mutants when they all lost their powers, boosting his own adaptive, evolutionary-based mutant powers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please go check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Who knows, maybe at some point I'll be on that channel for a second. You'll have to go subscribe to find out. Number 9. Kid Gladiator. Kid Gladiator is the son of Gladiator, aka Kalark, former Magister of the Shi'ar Empire. In fact, during his time with the X-Men, his father was the Magister, the ruler of the entire Shi'ar Empire. Like his father before him, he is extremely powerful, and confidence and belief in himself has also been tied to his power levels, boosting him when he is at his most confident. Number 8. Magma. Magma is Amara Akia. She was once a member of the New Mutants, who were known to be rivals of the Hellions team, but Amara developed an attraction for a member of the Hellions, Empath, which would later be revealed to be a mutual attraction between the two. Eventually, Magma would even leave the New Mutants and end up deciding to join the Hellions instead. Magma is pretty powerful despite the fact that she doesn't get a ton of love usually in the comics. She can move tectonic plates, causing short ranges of earthquakes, create lava, or of course magma, and manipulate and generate fire. Number 7. Empath. Empath, while downplayed somewhat in the current series, has to be one of the most powerful characters to have joined the Hellions team. Actually, I feel like he was downplayed because he's so powerful, because I don't know, you have a character this powerful and then have people get stuck in scenarios. He's actually a member of the original Hellions team as well as the new Hellions, which were reformed at the behest of Mr. Sinister under the leadership of Psylock. But he was also acting as a spy for the initial woman behind the Hellions, the original Hellions, Emma Frost. Empath is Manuel de la Rocha, and despite meeting many untimely ends during his time working on Sinister's Hellions, Empath is extremely powerful as he has the power in essence to manipulate and control others' emotions. Empath can also read emotions, being, as his name implies, an empath. He can change the level or type of influence he has over another person, turning them into a mindless zombie following his orders without question, a lovesick puppy, something more nuanced, or something in between any of these states of control. Empath can also exert his influence over more than one person at a time. Number 6. Firestar. Firestar is Angelica Jones. She was once a Hellion recruited by Emma Frost and later manipulated by her as well during her time on the team. Pretty disappointing for Angelica to find out later she greatly looked up to Emma at one point. Firestar has since proved her mettle enough to make the cut for the current X-Men team. Firestar's powers harness microwaves, which she can then emit in a fiery blast or use to cause her target to heat up and even melt, because microwaves. Firestar has also managed to use her powers in the past to disrupt psionic abilities. I also feel like microwaves don't sound that impressive, but when you think about it, microwaves are a pretty powerful thing to control. Number 5. Havoc. Often seeming to rank lower when it comes to polls for everyone's favorite Summers brother, Havoc is still a powerful hero and a super interesting character. Honestly, he does not get enough love. Ever the middle child, the amount of struggle and misfortune Alex Summers has seen in his life is pretty unprecedented. He never really wanted to become an X-Men, but ultimately resided to doing so because he found being in mortal peril seemed to have become something inescapable for him anyways in his daily life. I guess at that point you're kinda like, alright, fine, I guess I may as well become an X-Men. I'm already kinda in the whole scene anyways and I can't seem to get out of it. Havoc was a member of the newest Hellions team that appeared in the eponymous series from 2020. Havoc emits plasma bursts which radiate from him in circular waves from all around his body. He sometimes struggles to control his powers, which is why he can be seen as a danger or a loose cannon, or maybe, you know, not everybody's favorite because he's not as predictable. His plasma bursts come from cosmic energies that he can draw on and is pretty much always passively absorbing. Number 4. Quanon, aka Psylock, as she is simply known now. The only reason I'm ranking Psylock a little lower on this list is because many of us do know how powerful she is, but there are some out there who may be less inclined to be a fan of Psylock now due to the fact that she's 100% physically and mentally Kwannon, with zero trace of Betsy Braddock attached to the character anymore. I personally am super here for this change. Let Betsy do her own thing, and let Kwannon keep the mantle of Psylock. I think that makes sense, especially after everything she's been through. It seems fair, and it's not even really all she's due as a character in my opinion, because Kwannon, yeah, she got pretty messed up really for a while there. There's a lot more that she's owed as I see it. Psylock was the leader of the newest Hellions team, who were brought together by Mr. Sinister. And now she's over on the Marauders, but she's still kicking butt over there. Number 3, Mr. Sinister. While Mr. Sinister is an amazing weirdo of a character that I simply think many people, I guess, don't think of much at all, he is definitely someone to be considered. Not just for the fact that he is a deeply interesting and fashionable character in the comics, but also because he is immensely powerful when it comes to his intellect, his cunning, and at times, his abilities, depending on which era of Sinister we're talking about. The really interesting thing about Sinister is that although he is a major mutant and X-Men villain who possesses powers, he's not technically a mutant. Well, he is, and he isn't. The only reason he is allowed to be on Krakoa is because Sinister was decided to be basically mutant enough to gain an invitation to join the Mutant Nation. Nathaniel Essex was not born a mutant, but gained powers from Apocalypse, who altered him with celestial tech on a genetic level to give him powers and in essence evolve him. From there, Sinister would actually experiment on himself, using mutant genes to turn himself into a mutant by force. No wonder Deadpool is so sad about not getting invited to Krakoa. I mean, if Sinister qualifies, I feel like we have to let people like Wade and the until recently banned and dead Madeline Pryor join the party as well. I mean, just seems silly. It seems silly that Maddie was actually banned for so long just because she was a clone. Sinister not only possesses a genius level intellect, but is also immortal and a skilled psionic both in telepathy and telekinesis. He also has super strength, speed, dexterity, and endurance as well, and at one point he displayed teleportation abilities, although it was never really fully clarified as to if this was like tech or like an actual power that he possesses. So I'm not really sure where we are with the teleportation stuff. I think he's not a teleporter though. I haven't seen him teleport in a while, unless he's doing it when I'm not looking. Number 2, Cypher. Lately, Cypher has been having the time of his life on Krakoa. His power is that he can speak, communicate, and understand all languages as a mutant. In the past, he was often dunked on because of this, with his power set being seen as weak and, you know, not super useful. Sure, he could help break down communication barriers, but how useful is that in a fight where everyone can speak the same language? Over the years, we've seen Cypher's powers expanded upon and more broadly defined to include all forms of communication. Cypher can now also talk to computers as such, and even has been shown as a skilled fighter due to fighting being like a physical language that he can understand, read, and also speak physically. However, this element of his power was seemingly kind of forgotten during the Otherworld tournament, where he was one of Krakoa's champions, shown to be struggling a bit. He actually needed some help from Magic, and Magic was like, oh boy, oh Doug, you're struggling. On Krakoa, he's the only one who can communicate with the island nation, which also makes him extremely valuable and powerful. Number 1, Orphan Maker. Orphan Maker's full name has never been revealed, and I don't think we've ever gotten a face reveal of this character either, at least not as far as I can remember. We simply know his first name, Peter. He is a mutant who typically walks hand in hand with Nanny, who acts as his caretaker and sometimes his wrangler. While having the mental state of a child despite being seemingly a fully grown man, Orphan Maker has been shown to be pretty powerful when it comes to his fighting capability. To this day, we don't know his true mutant power, but it has been alluded to that his powers are great. In fact, that is apparently why he wears a suit, to contain his powers, and why after being resurrected on Krakoa, his X gene was not activated. It's been said that his powers are like earth-shattering. That's how powerful he is. Number 10, Cable. Cable might be suffering from the techno-organic virus, but even then he is so powerful that he can manage to actually stave it off and slow it down dramatically, continuing to live on as he travels through time without, you know, succumbing fully to the techno-organic virus. Oh yeah, did I mention he can also travel through time and teleport, and that he's an immensely powerful telekinetic and telepath? Because he is all of that and more. Cable is also a master strategist and fighter, having years of experience throughout time doing battle. Cable joined the X-Men back in the 1999 Astonishing X-Men series, and aside from that has also been a major player when it comes to other important X-Men teams such as Exterminators and X-Force. And friends, before before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please go and check out our newest channel and give it a sub, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Number 9. Magneto. Usually when people think of X-Men team members, they don't really think of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants leader and one of the most iconic X-Men villains ever, Magneto. But the reality is, Magneto isn't all bad all the time. And over the years, we've actually seen him redeemed quite a bit, becoming more than just a powerhouse of a villain, becoming also a powerhouse of an anti-hero, and in some cases, just a full-fledged hero. Magneto first joined up with the X-Men in the second Secret Wars crossover event, Secret Wars 2 from 1985, which followed the original Secret Wars event from 1984 and told the story of what happened afterwards when the Beyonder, instead of kidnapping superpowered individuals, decided to visit them on their home planet of Earth. Number 8. Rogue. Rogue is one of my all-time favorite X-Men, being one of the members I most gravitated towards as a kid when watching the 90s X-Men animated series. Well, Rogue and Jubilee, I would say, are my top faves from that series. Her powers are super cool, and over the years, as she's come into her own and learned more about herself, have also only become cooler over time. Rogue can, in essence, absorb the power and life force energy of those she touches, as well as their memories. Unfortunately for Rogue, this meant that for most of her life, she felt very alone, unable to touch anyone since basically puberty without fear of, hurting them, leaving them comatose, or worst of all, killing them. However, in recent years, Rogue has learned how to better master and control her powers, able to harness the powers of her fellow mutants without harming them, as we saw her do with a kiss on Jean's cheek during the current X-Men series during a cosmic casino heist. And she can also touch people without harming them at all, as we've seen with her and her husband, Gambit. Number 7. Genesis, or Evan Sabanur. Usually when we think of X-Men, we do not think of Apocalypse. Well, we maybe think of Apocalypse, but only in regards to him being one of the main villains of the team, not one of their most powerful and intimidating members and assets. However, Apocalypse isn't the only Apocalypse out there. Evan Sabanur is actually the clone of Apocalypse, who would take for himself the name of Genesis. And in fact, we later learn he isn't even the only Genesis either, with Apocalypse's wife also being known by that name, it turns out. Also, there's like another Genesis, there's a few Genesis. Genesis might not be as powerful yet as someone like Apocalypse, but it's possible that he actually has the potential to be even stronger than the original as time goes on. He also happens to be a bona fide hero, for the most part, minus when he had his alignment swapped in Axis. But other than that, he pretty much sticks to heroics and even ends up joining the X-Men. Number 6. Multiple Man. Multiple Man is such an amazingly powerful character. He is Jamie Madrox, and his mutant power is that he can create duplicates, nicknamed dupes, of himself to an almost unlimited extent. Initially in the comics, he tapped out at creating 40 dupes at a time, but now we've seen him create a whole laboratory staffing of dupes and more. His duplicates can go out in the world and live, and when he absorbs them back, ideally before they die, he absorbs everything they have known and learned, all their memories, experiences, skills, and knowledge. Of course, he does have to do that before they die. But because of this, Jamie is extremely skilled and is also a PhD multiple times over at this point. He's also done like an insane amount of jobs. He's like Barbie. He's done all the jobs that have ever existed pretty much at this point. Number 5. Juggernaut. Juggernaut is a non-mutant and former X-Men villain, at least currently in the comics, but that hasn't stopped him from joining the team. Juggernaut is also amazingly strong, being imbued with the power from the Gem of Cyttorak, which he acts as an avatar and servant for, serving Cyttorak's will. Cyttorak, however, no longer holds any power over Juggernaut. Recently, Juggy basically left Cyttorak's service to strike out on his own, but still was able to keep his power through remnants of Cyttorak's presence. Using materials Cyttorak left on Earth, Juggernaut was able to construct new armor for himself and harness Cyttorak's power through this, without being beholden to the demon god and his whims. Number 4. Sync. Sync is definitely having a big glow up moment right now in the comics, especially in regards to his power levels. And also, he literally glows. He glows rainbows. It's pretty cute. But also, in regards to some valuable character development, he's also seeing a huge glow up as well. Sync is Everett Thomas, a relatively newer character that was created back in 1994, making his first appearance appearance in the 90s X-Men comic series in issue number 36. He tragically died during his time at Emma Frost's mutant school program at the Massachusetts Academy, sacrificing himself in order to help save other students during an attack on the school. However, Synch was recently brought back, resurrected, to be part of a team to venture into the vault to learn more about the Children of Tomorrow, joined by mutants Laura Kinney, aka Wolverine, and Armando Munoz, aka Darwin. He recently joined the main X-Men team as well, and after his time in the vault, being the only one to escape with his knowledge of what happened within intact, he also seems to have leveled up his powers, being able to remain synced with other mutants even when not in their vicinity. So if you've heard other people talking him up lately, that's why. And you should probably read along and join them in that hype train. Toot toot. Number 3. Spider-Man. Did you know that Spider-Man was an X-Man? Yeah, he was. Even though he's not really a mutant, but a mutate. But hey, don't let that limit you. You can still be an X-Men, even if you're not a mutant. There's still hope for me. Kinda makes me feel bad for Deadpool though, who always wants to join in on the mutant fun and games and camaraderie, but is so often shafted by them because, well, he's Wade and he's kinda annoying. But of course, us readers all love him anyway. In fact, I think I love him more because he's annoying, but I digress. This is Peter's point, not Wade's point. Spider-Man ended up joining the X-Men in the wake of Wolverine's death, as Storm had found papers regarding to an idea to have Spider-Man join the team and teach his own special class of mutants. As such, he joins the X-Men in Spider-Man and the X-Men issue number 1. Number 2. Iceman. Bobby Drake is deserving of so much respect and praise when it comes to X-Men, and he's come a long way in terms of his character and power evolution throughout the years as a team member. Robert Drake is actually one of the original X-Men team members, becoming notorious for being the kid of the team, the youngest member on that original roster, who is also prone to pull pranks and get into all kinds of antics. In terms of his power set, Bobby has gone from being kind of a snowman in little black booties who loved eating ice cream and throwing snowballs and making ice walls, to an elemental mutant who can control not just snow, but ice and water. He can make ice golems which appear to even be somewhat sentient and living beings. He can shapeshift to become massive, travel in and through water as water himself, and has even been shown to be powerful enough, Omega level mutant that he is, to freeze hell over. Or at least, you know, a version of hell. Number 1. Ascani / Rachel Summers. Rachel Summers is definitely one of the most powerful mutants and X-Men members out there. Of course, she might not be the most powerful. After all, I did create a list of powerful X-Men members prior to this, so if you're thirsting for more powerful members of the X-Men after this video, you should definitely check out our part 1 as well to find out who took my real tippity top spot. But still, Rachel is deserving of a top spot for sure. She is the alternate reality daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey, who are known to make powerful children together across the multiverse. Hence also why Sinister is so obsessed with the two of them getting together. Rachel is one of the chosen hosts of the Phoenix Force, and even without the Phoenix is extremely powerful, being an immensely powerful telepath, telekinetic, and chronokinetic. She can read time, skip through it, travel to alternate timelines and dimensions, and even manipulate time. She also happens to be immune to timeline alterations as well, and is unique in that she is the only version of herself throughout the multiverse. Even another Rachel Summers, should she meet one, would not be an alternate of her. She has no other versions of herself, which makes her uniquely well suited to time travel. Because, you know, then she's not gonna like mess stuff up. Number 10. Cherub. Cherub is another of the Children of the Atom we got to know over the course of their 6-issue series. Cherub is Gabe Brathwaite. His powers, or the alien tech that allows him to appear to have powers, grant him the ability to fly with his winged suit and also allow him to emit sonic blasts. His powers are similar to Banshee and Angels. We also know that he is a fan of Forge and Dazzler, as he also went to go get Forge's autograph and attended a Dazzler concert with his friends and fellow Children of the Atom members. He makes his first appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. Number 9. Dr. James Boggs. Dr. James Boggs made his first appearance in Wolverine issue 11 of the current 2020 series run, volume 7 overall of Wolverine. Dr. James Boggs was a doctor who was recruited by the Vampire Nation to study Wolverine's blood and find a way to use it to eliminate vampires' weaknesses. He began to question the morality of what he was doing, but then he was forced to keep working for Dracula and the Vampire Vampire Nation when they transformed his lab assistant into a vampire, and made him one of his test subjects. However, this also inspired Dr. Bogs to betray Dracula, causing him to join forces with Omega Red, who was also coerced into working with Dracula and the Vampire Nation initially, but decided to betray them in order to truly join forces with his new home of Krakoa. In the end, Bogs was killed, but the attack against the Vampire Nation was successful. He will likely be one of the main casualties in what will become an all-out war against the Vampire Nation. Number 8. Kid Omega. I don't think many will debate Kid Omega being on this list. He might be gone for now in the comics, with his trope initially also being to constantly be killed during the early days of the current modern X-Men books, but don't let that fool you. Quentin Quire is still a psionic badass who deserves your respect. He is considered to be one of a limited few mutants who belong to the Omega level class, meaning that he has unlimited potential in terms of what he can accomplish. And while being super powerful psionically, he's also super brilliant as well, and can actually think faster and at a higher capacity than even other extremely powerful and skilled Omega level telepaths. Quentin joined up with Logan's X-Men and was shown to be a potential future Phoenix in Wolverine and the X-Men issue number 42. Number 7. Dupe. Dupe is one of the X-Men who is known for being pretty ridiculous, and as such a lot of people don't take Dupe seriously, which also extended to Dupe's power levels. However, I would argue that Dupe is actually one of the most powerful X-Men ever, who is simply grossly underrated due to his nonsensical appearance and his nonsensical depiction in the comics. Dupe has powers that allow him to influence the emotions of others, perform magic, resurrect, travel in the liminal space between comic book panels, shatter the fourth wall as he pleases, and so much more. Aside from strange abilities like being able to access an infinite storage dimension through his own body, he also is just extremely tough and physically strong as well. Dupe is also one of those characters who, when he needs to get things done, he kinda just can. There's a level of irrefutable plot armor with Dupe in a weird way. Number 6. Phoenix Force. The Phoenix Force is a weird one to think of as a member of the X-Men. More a cosmic entity than a physical flesh and blood person, the Phoenix Force does have a weirdly strong connection to the superhero community, initially being intrinsically tied to mutants and the X-Men, especially X-Men member Jean Grey. When you think about it, during the time when Jean is often known for being the Phoenix in the comics, this wasn't even really Jean on the team, but the Phoenix Force in Jean's place. While Jean was resting below in Jamaica Bay, Phoenix adopted her form and persona, joining the X-Men team in her place before turning into a villain of the team, becoming the Dark Phoenix, and seemingly, but of course not truly, perishing. If you consider this, Phoenix actually joined the X-Men team under the guise of Jean back in issue 101 of X-Men. Number 5. Vulcan. This is going to be a list that is just filled with Omega level mutants, isn't it? And Vulcan, of course, is no exception. While the youngest of Summers brothers, he is also often thought of as being the most powerful of them all as well. Vulcan is Gabriel Summers, the little brother that for most of their lives neither Scott nor Alex really knew existed. Vulcan joined the X-Men back when Professor X was putting together a rescue team to go into the, at the time, villainous mutant island of Krakoa and save his original X-Men team. Vulcan was part of the team that first attempted this, taking the name originally of Kid Vulcan for himself during his time training with Moira McTaggart's mutant team. While Vulcan's mission with this newly formed X-Men group wouldn't exactly go to plan, he would still remain a former X-Men member who years later would return to get revenge on the X-Men team he had attempted to save, who he blamed for launching him and fellow X-mate Darwin into outer space. Number 4. Storm. Definitely someone who deserves your acknowledgement and respect, both as an X-Man and as a ruler, goddess, queen, and regent of planet Arakko. Storm is actually one of the few people who survived the decimation of planet Arakko's populace, which happened recently. She was at the Quiet Council at the time, of course, of Uranus' attack, but I don't think this was a writing ploy to avoid her being killed, because, you know, some people are probably like, well, if she was there she'd have to die and that would be really bad. If anything, I actually think this was actually a writing ploy to avoid Uranus getting maimed and possibly killed by Storm, because that's how confident I am in Storm's abilities and power. Storm is a master of all the elements and initially joined the X-Men in Giant Size X-Men issue number 1 in 1975. She wouldn't just be a valuable member to the team though, but would also go on to be a strong leader, taking over for Cyclops as team leader in the comics as early as 1980 in Uncanny X-Men issue number 139. after his mourning of the loss of his love and teammate Jean Grey. Number 3. Jean Grey. You know, this list is a doozy because usually someone like Jean Grey takes my top spot when it comes to most powerful folks around lists. She's definitely one of the most powerful telepaths out there, and especially if we're talking X-Men members, Jean is also an original X-Men member too. So what's even more wild is that rather than become, a relic of the past who is bested by the younger, shinier mutant creations in comics, kind of like what's happened to Angel, I feel like, Jean has rather become a staple when it comes to the powerhouses of the X-Men, and she's returned to the X-Men multiple times as well. Jean initially joined the school and team back in X-Men issue number 1, all the way back at the beginning of X-Men history. Number 2. Hope Summers. I mean, what can I say about Hope that you don't already know? Hope Summers is definitely one of the most powerful mutants around in the comics. Don't think many people will dispute that. And the X-Men were fortunate for a time to actually have her on their roster, and just to have her around and as an ally, because she's super useful and super powerful. Hope's powers allow her to take at peak mastery the powers of any mutant that is within her vicinity. She is only limited really by range when it comes to this in terms of her ability to adopt one's powers, and she can adopt multiple powers at once as well. She doesn't drain the powers of her target and is instantly able to master any ability she takes on. It is pretty wild. She's also literally Mutant Jesus, being the baby everyone fought over in X-Men Second Coming. Hope isn't a Summers by birth, but was the adopted daughter of the son of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, and adopted son of Jean Grey, Cable, aka Nathan Summers. Number 1. X-Man. Nate Grey just has to be one of the most powerful mutants out there, and likely the most powerful mutant to have ever existed in the comics. He is the perfect offspring, perfect genetically anyways, of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, hailing from the Age of Apocalypse reality where he was genetically engineered by his world Sinister. Nate would later grow up to be raised not by his genetic parents, but by AOA Forge, who is basically his adoptive father. Nate has fought on the side of his own reality's X-Men before, helping them out, but being capable of traveling to other dimensions and realities and manipulate time as well, Nate has also fought alongside the X-Men of Earth 616, even joining the team in 1999 in Astonishing X-Men issue number 1. Number 10. Grey Crow. Grey Crow has probably been one of my favorite character evolutions in the comics. Originally, John Greycrow was a villain, one of Sinister's marauders, and was known by a codename so awful I cannot really speak it here. But you can look it up if you feel so inclined to see for yourself. However, he recently turned over a new leaf on Krakoa, finding camaraderie with the misfit team known as the Hellions, brought into existence at the suggestion of Mr. Sinister, but led by Psylock, and co-led really by John himself, who acted as Quanen's right-hand man. Greycrow's powers allow him to manipulate mechanics, which is generally why he himself often chooses to be covered in tech. And in fact, for a while I thought he was a cyborg, but he's not. He's just a guy covered in tech. And friends, before we move on to this next spot on our list, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please go check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Number 9. Beef. Beef was added to Emma Frost's Hellions team to be their new muscle after the loss of the second Thunderbird, James Proud, now known as Warpath. Beef is Buford Wilson. Of course his name is Buford. Of course it is. His mutant powers allowed him to increase his strength and his size. In increasing his size, his strength and endurance would also increase as well. We haven't really got to know Beef super well, so the limits for his power set are as of yet unknown, but he was able to get on the level of strength to rival Namorita, although he did inevitably lose to her during the Hellions battle with the New Warriors, which was way back when. Then he died for a bit, but now he's back. Beef. Number 8. Nighty Nightcrawler. So I know that technically everyone still keeps calling him Daycrawler, but Jason Thomas himself insisted he wanted to be renamed Nighty Nightcrawler during his time on the Children of the Atom team. And so I'm going to honor his request. Nighty Nightcrawler it is. Jason is the younger stepbrother of Marvel Guy, aka Benny Thomas, and the two near the end of the series get to have a really touching moment where we learn that Benny really does care about his younger stepbrother, despite seemingly resenting his new family members and dynamic. Nighty Nightcrawler's powers also come from alien tech like most of the rest of the Children of the Atom, and like his name implies, they are similar to Nightcrawler Kurt Wagner's powers, allowing him to teleport and modified to produce Nightcrawler's signature BAMF sound. Bamf! Number 7. Marvel Guy. Marvel Guy is Benny Thomas, stepbrother to Jason and also a member of the Children of the Atom. While Benny is a big Wolverine fan, his powers given to him by alien tech are more comparable to Jean's, hence his name, Marvel Guy. However, they are also a lot more restrictive than Jean's power set, which at this point allows her to do just about anything. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I also kind of feel like Marvel Guy's costume is a little bit more of an homage towards Wolverine, which I think is pretty cute. Like the other Children of the Atom, Marvel Guy has pieces of an older version of Magneto's helmet built in to protect him against telepaths. And he also possesses gloves which emit pheromones, allowing him to control and influence the minds of others. In most cases, he uses this to put his enemies to sleep, which I think is like the best way you could use those powers without being problematic, to be fair. Number 6. Jeff Bannister. Jeff Bannister is an ally and later friend of Wolverine's and a CIA agent who first appears in Wolverine issue number 1 of the current series and will likely show up again in the series in the future. He teamed up with Wolverine to learn the source of and put a stop to a deadly new drug that had surfaced called the pollen. Together, he and Wolverine track down the Flower Cartel and the Pale Girl, who was initially thought to be a shared hallucination brought on by the drug, though we'd later learn that she was actually a real person. Jeff Bannister also has a daughter who suffered from cancer. After Bannister worked with and befriended Wolverine, Logan was actually able to help his daughter by getting her immediate access to Krakoan medicines, which helped to cure her. Logan also gifted Bannister a Krakoan gate following their adventure together. Number 5. Pale Girl. While the Pale Girl might be a new character who hasn't appeared too much just yet, her role in the Wolverine story arc in which she appeared was pretty important, and the revelation about her character and just who she was also pretty important, and will likely lead to a huge ramification later on in the world of X-Men. As I said before, the Pale Girl was initially thought to be some kind of shared hallucination for those who use the pollen, until she was caught on camera. We'd later learn that the Pale Girl was actually a mutant, Meredith Milley. Meredith Milley was a secret dealer of the pollen and the one who was responsible for delivering shipments to the Order of the X from the Flower Cartel, which seemed to be Russian in origin and tied to mutants working for Russia. The Pale Girl was the missing piece to this puzzle and was also revealed to be a powerful mutant who, while appearing ghostly, could also take control of the minds of her victims, bending them to her will. Number 4. Death. Death is one of the children of Apocalypse and his wife Genesis. He is one of the original 4 Horsemen members, which also adds an extra dimension to the fact that Apocalypse generally is referred to any of his 4 Horsemen groups formed thereafter as his children. Although I guess he also kind of thinks of all mutants as his children, so there is that too. But Death is his actual and biological child. One of, anyways. Death ended up being the chosen champion for the Arakko tournament. He fought against Storm and was defeated. Their battle and just the focus on Storm and all of her struggles up till this point during it was amazing, and I wouldn't be surprised, as Death and Storm both also had a few flirty moments together, if we didn't see the two of them end up face to face again. I should also mention that Storm won her fight against Death while also being temporarily depowered. Yeah, because Storm is a badass. You can check out that fight in 2019's X-Force issue number 14. Recently, Death showed up in the current Wolverine series where he was approached by Logan and his vampire hunter friend, Louise, and asked to help them in their fight against Dracula and the Vampire Nation, to which he agreed. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, didn't he die at the end of the Ten of Swords tournament? He was like kind of torn apart? He didn't. He turns up in Cephalith later and he's alive. Don't worry about it, it's comics. I don't know if he's a vampire or he's just death so he can't die. I don't know. Number 3. Psylocke's daughter. Psylocke's daughter doesn't have a name just yet, but is a character that was hugely focused on in the Fallen Angel series. If you are a Psylocke fan and you wanted a Quantum-focused series, I highly recommend you check out that series. Psylocke teams up in the series with X-23 and Young Cable in an attempt to find out and rescue her daughter. In the end, Mr. Sinister is the one who ends up in possession of the child, who now leads a cybernetic existence within Apoth's remains, and uses her safety as a leverage in order to motivate Quantum to work for him as the leader of his Hellions team. While her daughter might not have a name yet, at least I don't think we've seen her with one, she was featured in an illusion created by Mastermind that Psylocke was trapped in issue 10 of Hellions. Another book that is a current recommended read for my Psylocke fans out there. And hopefully her daughter will get to come back and we'll get to see more of her. I think that could be cool. Number 2. Isca the Unbeaten. Isca is the sister-in-law to Apocalypse, being the sister of his wife Genesis. Her mutant ability is probably one of the coolest out there, along with Domino's luck ability. Isca's power is that she can never lose. She was one of the chosen champions of Arakko who competed in the Otherworld tournament in Ten of Swords, and of course won against her competitor, surprise surprise, the current Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock. Her powers, however, seemingly forced her to change sides in the war between the mutant nation of Arakko and Annihilation's Amenthi demons. She abandoned the mutants of Arakko, joining up with the Amenthi due to the fact that the mutants had become the losing side, and her power prevented her from ever losing. So a little bit into her history there. I like Isca a lot. Number 1. Horticulture. Horticulture is probably one of my favorite new villain teams and groups of characters we've seen thus far in the current line. And they also were someone that could probably threaten the entire Earth, so they might become like huge supervillains in the future. They are a team of elderly women who are scientists, specifically working in the field of botany with plants. I don't know why I said with plants, that's kind of redundant, but you know what I mean. Botany, plants, those are things. Their goal is to eliminate a large chunk of the human population in an effort to return the Earth to a more natural and pristine state. Their leader is Augusta, and members include Lily, Edith, and Opal. It is possible there could be more members of Horticulture as well. These are just the 4 women that we are familiar with based on the 2019 X-Men series and Empire Limited series, where they appeared as enemies and for a short time during Empire, reluctant allies. We've also learned through the Avengers side of things that Harrower, Augusta's great niece, was a former member of the team who split off to do her own thing. Horticulture first made their appearance in volume number 5 of the X-Men in issue number 3. That's the 2019 X-Men series, not the 2021 one, which is the current one. Number 10. Louise. Louise is not a major character in terms of being a huge mutant or key villain to mutants in the current series, but she is someone who will likely end up becoming a close friend and ally of Wolverine's. She first appeared in issue number 1 of the newest Wolverine series that started in 2020. I actually remember reading that first issue when I was in New York City right before the world went crazy. Oh my, what a time. Memories. Louise is a member of the Night Guard, and while she dropped off after issue 1, as we keep coming back to Dracula and the Vampire Nation's going-ons in the Wolverine series, she too has resurfaced. Louise was given a suit by Forge to help slow her transformation into a vampire after she and her Night Guard were attacked and either killed or turned. She once more teamed up with Logan as they went head-to-head with Dracula and his loyal subjects, and likely she'll be back again as this slow burning story continues to be developed. In fact, I think this is going to be like the big story before the end of this current Wolverine series, whenever we get there. Number 9. Cyclops Lass. So Cyclops Lass might not be one of the most important characters on this list, but I still think she is a character you should get to know because, well, she's just a cool character. I really like Cyclops Lass. Cyclops Lass is Beatrice Buddy Bartholomew and is the leader of the Children of the Atom. By the way, it took me a minute to realize when I first heard of this fan-composed mutant-inspired teen hero team's name that their group name was another phrase used for mutants and even the X-Men back in the day. It's pretty cool when you realize that. Neat stuff. Cyclops Lass appears to have powers similar to the X-Men member and often leader, Cyclops, but in reality we learned that it was actually alien tech which gave her team their powers, allowing them to appear like mutants and like some of their favorite X-Men members. Still, Buddy is a cool character, and while Children of the Atom has ended, I do hope we get to see more of its team members. Buddy made her first cameo appearance in Marvel's Voices issue number 1 and her full appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. Number 8. Pestilence. Pestilence is the daughter of Apocalypse and another member of the original 4 Horsemen. Pestilence probably has my favorite character design of all of Apocalypse's children, wearing a sun disk headdress atop her head that covers half of her face. Initially, I thought her head was just actually half sun disk, which greatly informed the way I imagined her character's voice in my mind, to be honest, but I'm still gonna keep it like that in my mind. I wish I could put you in there so you could hear her voice, but I can't, and I definitely can't do a very good impression of it right now on the fly, but I'll work on that for the future. Pestilence is another of Apocalypse's children that we kinda know less about, not actively participating in the Otherworld tournament in the Ten of Swords either, and also acting as a representative of Arakko and Amenth. However, both Pestilence and Famine did get involved near the end of the Ten of Swords event when an all-out war broke out between the mutants of Krakoa and the demons and mutants of Amenth and Arakko. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want that part 4, and you want to go crazy with me and talk about even even more mutants? Be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also let us know in the comments. Also maybe share it. I don't know. Number 7. Ultimaton. Ultimaton actually isn't a new character in the sense of his first appearance, but we did get some new revelations that changes the way that we see his character and definitely makes him feel newly revitalized in terms of lore. Ultimaton's true identity has been unknown for years. Also, I hope I'm saying that right. We're talking over a decade in terms of comic book history of us not knowing who this really is. But in the recent giant-sized Phantom X, which came out in August last year, 2020 if you're watching this into the far future, we learned who Ultimaton really was, as the old villain created by Grant Morrison and Chris Bachalo back in 2003 finally became unmasked. Turns out that Ultimaton is closely related to Phantom X himself, being his identical brother who was also created in the world. One of the many attempts to create a perfect specimen by AIM. But unlike Phantom X, he wanted to stay in the world. He's like, I don't want to stay here, I'm good. Number 6. Sarah St. John. Although another seeming non-mutant, Sarah St. John could definitely be a huge person of interest moving forward in the new X-Corp comic. Also, this comic was probably my most anticipated new X book in terms of all of the ones we've had announced up till this point. I was just so excited for a business-focused series, plus the return of the X Corporation, plus Angel and Monet both getting to have their time in the spotlight as the main characters of this book. And I gotta say, so far it has not disappointed me, even with all my extra hype about it. X-Corp issue 2 is the Hellfire Gala issue, where the newly relaunched X-Corp team are holding meetings with those interested in investing or otherwise helping the corporation along, making partnerships with them or working for them, you know what I mean? One meeting they don't really manage to get to until it's too late is with Sarah St. John, a representative of Noblesse Pharmaceuticals. Sarah proves to be charming when they do meet up and is the only human who reached out to X-Corp to arrange a meeting during the evening of the gala, should be noted. However, it's revealed that she already made a possibly lucrative sized deal with the newly formed and antagonistic to X-Corp group, Fenris Consulting, owned by the mutant Von Strucker twins Andrea and Andreas. Number 5. Children of the Vault 4.0. That's right, we're talking 4th generation Children of the Vault. It's getting real, baby! While the Children of the Vault may not be a new group, each time they return to the Vault, they're generally upgraded and basically a new version of the team is produced. A new generation, if you will. Initially, with all the information the Vault had acquired, it was only able to evolve them to a 3rd generation, which already was really impressive and powerful. However, after acquiring Darwin's genetic material for study, they were able to evolve even past that final stage, giving us the unstoppable 4th generation of the Children of the Vault. We saw this evolution of the team in 2019's X-Men issue 19, and boy are they scary. I cannot wait to see the X-Men face them again in the future. I'm sure that's gonna happen. I love when I see things in just the X books in general and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a huge problem later down the line. Krakoa has so many enemies, it's crazy. Number 4. Solemn. Solemn is the one that I initially expected Wolverine to fight in the Ten of Swords event. I mean, I think we all did, but he didn't really. Solemn is one of the sword bearers of Arakko who was actually imprisoned when he was recruited. He was imprisoned because he had killed Bracken, War's husband, so War was initially reluctant in recruiting him, even more so when Solemn acted as though he was actually greatly needed and should not only be freed for serving as a champion of Arakko in the Otherworld tournament, but also deserved to receive rewards and gifts for his service. Solemn's powers as a mutant of Arakko grant him super strength and durability. His mutation is that he has adamantium skin. You can see then how he'd make a great match for Logan and why we were all expecting it to happen. Solemn first appeared in 2020's Wolverine in issue 6. He ended up teaming up with Wolverine and went to Hell when they both went to retrieve their blades needed to compete. Because they were in Hell, because Muramasa blades. As expected, he makes his return in Wolverine, where he ends up stealing Logan's Muramasa blade, which Wolverine used in, of course, the tournament. So now Solemn has 2 Muramasa blades. And everybody else has 0 Muramasa blades. Number 3. Ned. So you might all be thinking that I am crazy for putting Ned so high up on this list, but he's just so great. Honestly, you need to know about him just because of how hilarious and how great Ned is. Ned is a lackey of Ames who ends up being recruited by Phantom X to return to the world in an effort to save Storm. Because, well, Ned has super important AIM knowledge, or something like that. Ned ends up joining them in an attempt to save Storm from a version of the techno-organic virus, as Storm would rather save herself than give up to be killed off and resurrected by the Five. Which also, Storm is such a badass. Ned was also important enough to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala, where even after, I assume, receiving his payout from Phantom X to betray AIM, he was still wearing his AIM suit for some reason. Also, I love his appearance at the Hellfire Gala. If you haven't checked out all those issues, you should go and just look who's in the background, because there's a lot of little treats for all y'all that might have been reading all the X books. Ned makes his first appearance in Giant Size Phantom X, and then of course returns when we see them go actually back to the world in Giant Size Storm. Number 2. War. War is another child of Apocalypse, and the final member that I'll have touched on of the original 4 Horsemen. The final one, if you will. Unlike Famine and Pestilence, War did participate in the Otherworld tournament alongside her brother Death. War lost her match despite her unbridled rage because of the wonderful weirdness that was the Ten of Swords event, being a tournament that was led by the mischievous and unpredictable White Witch Saturnine. War ended up actually having to face off against one of her fellow sword bearers, Solemn. However, Solemn, knowing that War obviously really hates him because Solemn killed War's husband, took this opportunity to call in a favor owed to him by Wolverine, and so Wolverine actually had to step in for Solemn in the match. Solemn then revealed that Wolverine was actually the one to have defeated her son in a battle to the death during that match, which of course made War furious with grief and rage. Her anger, while initially making her appear stronger, actually ended up making her vulnerable to an attack from Wolverine, and he managed to cut off her hand and win the match for Solemn, gaining a point for Arakko, unfortunately, with his victory, even though he won. Bittersweet. Number 1. Summoner. Summoner was actually the character featured on our Part 2 thumbnail, so for those who wondered who that was, here's your full answer. Summoner is the grandson of Apocalypse and the son of War and Bracken. However, Summoner is one of the characters who did not survive the Otherworld tournament. Summoner was one of Arakko's sword bearers and champions. He faced off with Wolverine in Ten of Swords in the Otherworld tournament and lost against Logan, being killed with the Muramasa blade. Though it should be noted their fight against one another was pretty epic. Definitely a great read. You can check out that battle in 2020's Wolverine in issue 7. Summoner was a summoner, hence his name. He was able to summon and control the dark beasts of Arakko, elementals, and demons. It should also be noted that Summoner also betrayed Krakoa, pretending to be a friend and then being like, yeah, I'm just here to actually backstab my grandpa Apocalypse and backstab all you mutants because we want to take over Krakoa. Hey. He didn't thumbs up anybody after though, just to be clear. Number 10. Dupe. Dupe is one of the X-Men who is known for being pretty ridiculous, and as such a lot of people do not take Dupe seriously at all, which also extends to Dupe's power levels. However, I would argue that Dupe is actually one of the most powerful X-Men ever, who is simply grossly underrated due to his nonsensical appearance and depiction. Dupe has powers that allow him to influence the emotions of others, perform magic, resurrect, travel in the liminal space between comic book panels, shatter the fourth wall as he pleases, and honestly, so much more. I think perhaps this is the reason, in fact, that he doesn't appear as often in the comics, and therefore isn't as appreciated for his powers by fans. He's just too crazy. He's just too powerful. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love it when we talk about X-Men, I know I love it, be sure that you click that subscribe button, ring that bell so you do not miss out whenever we are talking about all the X-Men goodness. Number 9. Tempest. Tempest could literally undo anyone in the blink of an eye, like she did with Matthew Malloy, who was set up to be pretty much the most powerful mutant in almost all of existence, I would say. His reality bending was honestly off the charts, and yet Tempest was able to defeat him by traveling back in time to make sure his parents never met. Ho-ho. Her ability allows her to create time bubbles in which she can control the flow of time. Her powers earned her a place on Krakoa's Five, a team created for the purpose of handling all mutant resurrections. She can slow or speed up time as much as she wants within the bubbles, and can also use her chronokinesis powers to time travel. Number 8. Cosmar. Cosmar is one of the new Mutants, if that makes sense. She first appeared in issue number 9 of the newest series from 2020. Currently there are 2 different groups of New Mutants in that series, the one based on the mutant island nation of Krakoa, who are truly feeling those outcast vibes right now, and currently are like the Shadow King's lost mutant kids, and the other traditional New Mutant team who is more focused on space adventures and other international exploits. When Cosmar's powers first manifested, it resulted in the death of her parents. Her powers cause her to suck people into her nightmares, as she creates a reality warping sphere surrounding her. All those who touch or interact with it run the risk of being sucked in. And I believe Forge actually made her a suit as well, as Forge is just making everybody little things to help them with their powers, to help her sort of control those powers so that they wouldn't be so disastrous. Number 7. Gimmick. Gimmick is a New Mutant who first appeared and had her powers manifest in Children of the Atom. She was the one member of the team who actually ended up making it to Krakoa due to the fact that she was a real mutant, in addition to also being a major fangirl of the X-Men. But aside from her being a mutant, Carmen Cruz is also good friends with the fellow Children of the Atom, with Cyclops Lass, aka Buddy, probably being her best friend on the team and also her secret crush who she's in love with. Another thing that I love about Carmen is that she also is the person that makes all the costumes on the team, and she's super into cosplay, which I just think is like super cool and super cute. We don't have a lot of characters in the comics that are cosplayers, so I really liked that element. Gimmick's powers appeared initially to be similar to Gambit's, but this was all done using alien technology. In reality, when Carmen's mutant powers manifested, it was revealed that they were shapeshifting in nature and also granted her a healing factor. Carmen made her first cameo appearance in 2020 in Marvel's Voices issue 1, but would appear fully in the first issue of Children of the Atom the following year in 2021. Also, when she did have her Gambit powers, it was pretty cool because she was like throwing basically little like clothing pins, if that makes sense, at people, which I love. Number 6. Maxim and Manon. Maxim and Manon are relatively new characters and mutants who appeared within the last year, but we also now potentially have a different version of them in the current X books. They're likely from a different continuity due to what we learned during the Dawn of X period of the current line. There's like a version of them I think that's like 616, and then there's a version of them that doesn't actually have a reality number officially yet, but yes. Maxim and Manon, as we see them in the current timeline, are a brother and sister who together can heavily manipulate and warp the minds of others. Maxim can manipulate the emotions of his target, and Manon can manipulate and alter their memories, making the two a powerful duo when working in tandem. Maxim and Manon once served Ahab, being brainwashed into using their powers to make hounds for him. However, they would later be freed by Jean Grey, and Cable would convince her to look after them. Maxim and Manon are currently relevant because in the New Mutant series, they use their powers to make two humans attack one another and fight to the death, which is against Krakoan law. Woo! However, nothing seems to have come from them taking this extreme action just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes around at some point. Number 5. Bei the Blood Moon. Bei the Blood Moon is an awesome new character who made her first appearance in the Ten of Swords event back in the second main book from the event, Ten of Swords Stasis. She was one of the Arakko mutants who was called to compete in the Otherworld tournament, fighting to represent her nation. However, her fight actually ended up being a marriage. Basically, the Otherworld tournament was gloriously weird because it was being led by Saturnine, so we had traditional sword fights combined with lots of different kinds of battles, including puzzle solving duels, food eating competitions, dance-offs, and even an arranged marriage. However, it also all worked out as Cypher and Bei were seemingly both enamored with the other, as they were both masters of language and communication, but who struggled to understand one another, which fascinated them both, especially Cypher. They were both married and were each awarded a point, as it was considered a shared victory for both sides. Also, the art in the issue of Excalibur where they get married is just so good. It's so great. I love it. Number 4. Chen Zhao. Chen is not a mutant, nor is she an ally to mutant kind. She is just the opposite, their enemy. After coming up against the Marauders, trying to inspire mutant hate in her people as a public figurehead, billionaire, and anti-mutant activist, she ended up allying herself with Ham and his Verendi. Still hell-bent on destroying mutant kind's reputation as heroes, and now especially focused on doing harm to the band of mutant heroes that we know as the Marauders. Chen Zhao made her first appearance back in 2019 in Marauders issue 1, which once again, if you haven't read any of this comic, why not go back and start with that first issue in Chen's first appearance. Currently, Chen is Hominis Verendi's White Bishop, and she's definitely a villain that I think is going to be more prominent and keep getting like more badass, which I love. Number 3. Dolores Ramirez. Dolores Ramirez is another non-mutant, but someone who is a very important character within and around the X-Men universe currently. She is the head of the X-Desk, and no, I don't mean that she worked with Jonathan Hickman to bring our current line of X-Books to life. Within Earth 616, she is the one who presides over the United States government X-Desk, which monitors, keeps tabs on, and ultimately kind of spies on the mutant nation of Krakoa and its major players and political stratagems. The X-Desk is a department within the CIA. Dolores once offered to help fellow CIA agent Jeff Bannister, ally of Wolverine, who had been working with him, but he turned her down. Dolores was also one of the lucky few to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala and met with Storm in secret during her first appearance in Marauders issue 11, where she was rewarded for leaking some important information about poisoned medicine to the mutants. So while she's watching them, she also kind of seems pretty friendly. Number 2. Arakko. Arakko is both an island and a mutant, just like Krakoa. In fact, there was a time when both Krakoa and Arakko were joined together, but years ago they were separated. Arakko made their first appearance in Powers of X issue number 4, and later on we learn of all that went on there with the island, including the mutants who inhabited it and their connection to a vastly important mutant, Apocalypse. Following the Ten of Swords event, Arakko attempted to reunite with Krakoa, but both islands decided they were no longer really interested in one another, and the time had basically changed them. They reluctantly rejoined until a more suitable option was found for Arakko and the mutants of Krakoa. In planet-size X-Men, some of the mutants banded together under the direction of Magneto to terraform Mars and move Arakko and its inhabitants, the mutants of Arakko, to the now alive planet. That's what happens when you terraform a planet, you bring it to life again. I actually didn't know that Mars was considered a dead planet until I read Planet-Size X-Men, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm also learning some science facts, which is great. Number 1. Genesis. One of the most badass of all the new characters we've gotten recently in the world of X-Men. Genesis is the long-lost wife of Apocalypse, who also was one of the main leaders of Arakko. She ended up fighting against Annihilation and becoming its new host in order to save her people, uniting both the Amenthi and the mutants of Arakko. Donning the mask, she became a leader of the Amenthi demon army, but also lost a part of herself in the process, as the Annihilation mask possessed and corrupted her. However, during the Ten of Swords tournament, she fought against her husband, Apocalypse, who managed to free her from the golden helm of Annihilation, taking it for himself. But Apocalypse's will proved strong enough to resist its influence, and the mask was then transformed by Saturnine into a much less influential and corrupting staff, which was then gifted to Genesis. Genesis made her first full appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 12, but we wouldn't learn that she was Annihilation until much later.
Number 10. Northstar and Aurora. Look at me, cheating right out the gate. Northstar and Aurora are mutant twins who have the same powers, which is why they are listed together. Jean-Marie and Jean-Paul Barbier were separated early in life when their parents died in a car accident. Jean-Paul ended up in foster homes before eventually becoming an Olympic skier, while Jean-Marie ended up at a strict Catholic girls' boarding school, which was so traumatic that she ended up developing dissociative identity disorder, creating an alternate personality known as Aurora. Each twin possesses super speed as well as the ability to fly. Because some readers are likely more familiar with Northstar due to his time on the X-Men, away from his sister, they may be surprised to learn that when the twins link hands, they produce an intensely bright light that can be used to blind their enemies, making them even more powerful as a pair. Number 9. Sasquatch. Walter Lankowski was a brilliant and athletic student at Penn State on a football scholarship when he struck up a friendship with a fellow student named Bruce Banner. The two went their separate ways, but Banner inspired a fascination with gamma radiation in Walter. Walter became a player for the Green Bay Packers before retiring to finish his graduate studies at MIT. Fascinated by the Hulk, Walter decided to conduct a similar, though more controlled, gamma experiment on himself. This transformed him into the incredibly strong creature known as Sasquatch. Although at first glance he seems to simply be a knockoff of Hulk, due to the help of his teammate Snowbird, Walter is able to keep the beast at bay and retain his genius intellect, when in his Sasquatch form, something the Hulk is only occasionally capable of in the comics. This makes him more than a blunt instrument, often helping the team just as much as a genius scientist.
Number 8. Juggernaut. Juggernaut, a well-known X-Men antagonist, is widely regarded as one of the most powerful characters in the comics. Even though he is not a mutant, he became a member of the X-Men team after losing most of his abilities due to a dispute with Cyttorak and seeking reconciliation with his stepbrother Charles Xavier. Interestingly, Juggernaut managed to form many friendships during his time with the X-Men. When I say that Juggy is underrated, I don't necessarily mean as a powerful character. I think we all know how powerful and dangerous Juggernaut can be. I personally would not want to face him, that is for sure. But when it comes to him as a member of the X-Men, I feel like this is often overlooked and that overall he's a somewhat underrated member of the team in terms of what he brings to it. And I don't just mean in terms of his powers. Number 7. Beast. Beast is underrated on, honestly, a lot of levels, whether we're talking about classic Beast or current Beast, but especially I feel with the current Beast that we have, that guy is downright deadly. Not only was he unable to be reined in by Wolverine, who ultimately ended up killing Beast after Beast had him become his lapdog to be sent out on some of the darkest missions of X-Force, reducing Wolverine to a mere tool used for wiping out perceived threats to Krakoa, but he also perhaps has become even more dangerous after being resurrected. Now we have multiple Beast clones who themselves are working on their own small army of Wolverine clones with the project known as Weapons of X. Number 6. Synch. Synch is only now starting to be fully appreciated by fans around the world, all thanks to his reappearance in the Krakoa era. Synch was one of the people prioritized for resurrection, as he was needed to go on a mission into the Vault where the Children of the Vault had retreated. Considering them and their evolution a threat, the Quiet Council put together a small away team to investigate what was happening inside the Vault, sending them out to basically infiltrate it. This is just what Synch, Darwin, and Laura Kinney, then known as Wolverine, currently known as Talon in the comics, were tasked to do. It's here that we got to bask in Synch's rainbow colors, saw the relationship develop between Everett himself and Laura, and where we learned that it might be possible for Synch to even sync with others who are not mutants. We'd also learn in the X-Men series that Synch had evolved to a point that he could remain synced with his fellow mutants even when outside of their range, making Synch possibly one of the most powerful mutants to just have ever existed. Number 5. Banshee. Banshee, simply put, isn't a hero we focused on here on Top 10 Nerd. I can't remember the last time I featured him on a list, and yet he kicks butt consistently in the comics. Banshee's mutant powers turn him into a siren, which oddly enough is the name for his daughter, who shares his abilities, the name that she took up for herself as an active mutant hero. Banshee can use his powers to attack his opponents, fly, see in the dark with sonar abilities, influence and persuade his opponents, and even create shields, all with the use of his amazing voice. Basically, he's like a smaller scale Black Bolt, which means that while Black Bolt, the Inhuman King, gets a ton of love in the comics and outside, other Sonic-based heroes like Banshees, Sean Cassidy tend to fall by the wayside, sadly. Number 4. Chimera. Chimera is the daughter of Storm and likely Black Panther, who hails from the alternate reality 13729. Chimera seems to have inherited the powers of her mother, but also shares a connection to the Earth, which allows her to draw on and harness its energy. She is also a skilled tracker and can communicate telepathically with animals. I'd also assume, as she's the daughter of Storm and of T'Challa, that she is a skilled combatant as well, as while Storm is more well known for her goddess status and weather manipulation powers, she's also an extremely skilled fighter as well, and her dad would obviously be a given inspiration for her as a fighter. Black Panther is well known for his fighting prowess. Chimera may have hailed from Earth 13729, where she was a member of the X-Men, but after being displaced to Earth 616, the main comic book continuity, she also became a member of the X-Men there as well. Number 3. Angel/Archangel. Warren Worthington III is not usually folks' first pick for mutants who are their favorite among those who have belonged to the X-Men team, but it is important, I think, to acknowledge Warren's history history with the mutants and consider the fact that he is a legacy member of the X-Men. Warren joined up with the very first roster of the X-Men team to have ever existed, being one of the first members to be brought together by Charles Xavier. Sure, he might have hollow bones, and his powers may mostly involve just flight, but when it comes to flying, Warren has proven in the past that he is one of the best, and in his Archangel form, he is even more powerful. He is also one of the most useful mutants outside of his power set, being an extremely accomplished businessman who tends to be one of the most charismatic members of the X-Men, who since his early days has been popular with the public, helping the team's image. Number 2. Polaris. Polaris is a character who I feel like often gets overshadowed by her dad, Magneto, and yet she too is just as much, or nearly as much I'd say, of a powerhouse as he is. Polaris has had somewhat of a rough go in recent years, especially when it comes to confronting her past and moving forward towards her future. I would love to see more moments like when she joined the X-Men, where she gets her moment in the spotlight. It's well deserved, and Lorna Dane deserves to not have her character sabotaged at every single turn, like has happened to her in some of her past. She's underrated on multiple levels, both as a hero and as a character with some real depth to her. I think it would be really amazing to see her team up with her now considered adoptive sister and brother as well to fight against injustice in the world. I love all the healing we've been doing with this whole family lately, and it would be so cool to continue along that path and see where else it could take us, especially if we bring the family together as a unit. I've seen it happen a little bit in the comics, but I'd love to see more of it. Number 1. Kid Omega. Poor Kid Omega's trope initially with his appearance in the Krakoan era X-Men comics involved him constantly being taken out, as in permanently defeated. But don't let that fool you. Quentin Quire is still a psionic badass who deserves your respect. He is considered to be one of a limited few mutants who belong to the Omega level class, meaning that he has unlimited potential in terms of what he can accomplish. And while being super powerful psionically, he's also super brilliant as well, and can actually think faster and at a higher capacity than even other extremely powerful and skilled Omega level telepaths. Quentin joined up with Logan's X-Men and has been shown to be a potential future Phoenix in Wolverine and the X-Men issue number 42. Number 10. The Viscora. The Viscora are more than just one character, they are a bunch of them. They made their first appearance in 2020's Cable issue 5, where they appeared as an antagonistic alien race, although we haven't seen them since, really. I'm still of the mind that the Viscora will return, and perhaps that they never really left, but managed to infect either Scott Summers or Jean Grey, or possibly both, and are laying dormant waiting for a moment to strike. Of course, it's been a while now since we've seen them, so this probably isn't what happened. But either way, I would not be surprised if we saw them again. The Viscora were the reason that S.W.O.R.D. initially went offline and disappeared. Their goal is to travel the cosmos looking for new worlds to absorb into their collective consciousness, learning everything they can about them before completely cleansing said world or possibly universe, wiping out everything within its existence. Should admit, I don't know if they came from another world or another dimension. The portal that they come through kind of implies that they perhaps came from another dimension, but yeah, we haven't seen a lot of them. Number 9. Famine. Famine is another of Apocalypse's children, and originally 4 horsemen. Unlike Death, who I mentioned on our part 2 of this series, Famine was not as deeply involved in the Otherworld tournament, so we haven't got to know them quite as well as some of his more predominantly featured siblings. Famine, instead of being directly involved as a champion of Arakko in the Otherworld tournament featured in the Ten of Swords event, stayed behind instead to act as a representative and witness on behalf of Amenth and Arakko, watching the tournament unfold as a guest of Saturnine. There to witness the tournament and kind of argue about things going on. There was some of that happening.
Number 8. Thunder. This one's a bit of a journey, so stick with me. In World War II, Lewis Sadler became Major Maple Leaf, who was the Canadian equivalent to Captain America. He had limited invulnerability as well as super strength, which made him a true force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. Many years later, his son, Lewis Sadler Jr., would take on the Major Maple Leaf mantle. When the original Alpha Flight team was kidnapped by a group of aliens, Sasquatch recruited the new Major Maple Leaf to join a new version of the team in an effort to mount a rescue mission. It was assumed that he had the same powers as his father, as well as power blasts and the ability to fly, but it turned out that the new Major didn't actually have any powers. Not that he would ever admit it. No, it turned out that the one with powers was actually his magical horse, Thunder. Thunder, the super equine, has all the aforementioned powers as well as extremely high intelligence for a horse. So like the equivalent intelligence of a normal person. He can also communicate basic messages to the Major through meaningful gazes. Thunder is pretty chill about Major Maple Leaf stealing his, well, thunder, and remained Sadler's faithful steed for the duration of the character's run. Number 7. Snowbird. In an effort to save the Earth from the mystical great beasts, the Inuit goddess of the Northern Lights, Nelvana, mated with a human in order to create a daughter, Naria, who came to the Earth to protect Canada from the evil great beasts. She took on the secret identity of a RCMP officer named Anne Mackenzie, and soon joined the original Alpha Flight team as Snowbird. Snowbird's most well-known ability is to transform herself into any animal found in northern Canada, taking on its mass and strength, as well as any of the animal's other abilities. Some of her transformations include polar bears, owls, and whales. She can also turn into mystical Canadian creatures, giving her the power to become the dangerous and incredibly powerful Wendigo. Beyond these more well-known powers, she also possesses super strength in her human form, as well as post-cognition, which is the ability to see events that have transpired in the past at a given location. In Snowbird's case, she can see up to 6 hours in the past. Although this weakness no longer applies, Snowbird used to grow weak and sick if she was taken outside of Canada's borders. Number 6. Talisman. Elizabeth Two Young Men is the estranged daughter of Shaman, who reluctantly joined Alpha Flight and began working with her father. She eventually reached into the shaman's mystical pouch and found the Coronet of Enchantment, transforming Elizabeth into Talisman. Although she cannot remove the tiara without suffering excruciating pain, it grants her the ability to cast several impressive spells. Some of these spells give her the abilities of levitation, teleportation, and matter manipulation, just to name a few. Although her father can ask spirits to act on his behalf, the Coronet also gives Talisman the power to make spirits do what she wants. Number 5. Madison Jeffries. Another mutant member of Alpha Flight, Madison Jeffries served in the Vietnam War as a mechanic before returning home to Canada. He has the ability to alter and restructure inorganic materials with his mind. He uses this to create weapons and machines that help him in battle. When he returned home, he began suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which caused him to lose control of his powers and take over a small town. Wolverine was sent in to deal with the situation and helped Jeffries before he was recruited into the Alpha Flight training program, Gamma Flight. He eventually joined the main team, even having a relationship with Vindicator while her husband Guardian was presumed dead. Jeffries' powers extend beyond simply being able to control machines. He can actually phase his body and consciousness into machines, which he used on several occasions to merge with the Box mech suit to heighten his strength in combat. Number 4. Guardian. The leader of Alpha Flight, James McDonald Hudson, was a scientist working for the AmCam oil company to develop an exosuit to make oil exploration more efficient. When he discovered that AmCam was planning to sell the suit to the Americans to use as a weapon, he destroyed the prototype and went to work for the Canadian government, developing his supersuit and going through various different hero names before settling on Guardian. His power suit acts as a powerful armor while providing him with force field protection. The armor also gives him the ability to fly and shoot concussive electromagnetic beams. Although he does not have super strength, he can use a graviton beam to lift heavy objects. He can also be propelled westward at the same speed as the rotation of the Earth, making him appear to teleport. When he was presumed dead, his wife Heather wore a similar suit, taking on the name Vindicator, leading the team in his absence. It was later revealed that Guardian had been rescued by the alien race, the Quarillan, who saved his life. They mistakenly thought the suit was part of him and turned him into a cyborg, making all of the suit's powers a part of him. Number 3. Puck. In his original appearances, Eugene Judd was simply a little person who had incredible acrobatic abilities and fighting skills. When John Byrne left the series, it was revealed that he had actually once been an extremely large man who was attacked by an evil sorcerer. This resulted in him being given a lengthened lifespan, but losing his height as a result. Puck's compression grants him super strength, being able to lift 10 tons and move at superhuman speed. One of the most beloved members of Alpha Flight, Puck is considered the heart of the team. He was killed by the Collective. Puck was sent to Hell, where he fought his way all to the top, becoming the ruler of Hell for a time, before returning to life to help save the lives of his friends. Number 2. Marina. Marina was found as an egg by the Smallwood family in Newfoundland, who raised the young alien as their own before she was recruited to train with Gamma Flight, eventually graduating to Alpha Flight in their first issue. She soon left the team to pursue a relationship with Namor the Submariner, who she eventually married. As an amphibian, Marina is able to thrive both above and below the water, being able to swim at a top speed of 51 knots. At times, her alien instincts would make her become bloodthirsty and violent, causing her hands to transform into deadly talons. Although not one of the most powerful members of the team, she eventually transformed into a Leviathan, a giant sea snake that could shoot beams from her eyes. Number 1. Shaman. Dr. Michael Two Young Men was Canada's most brilliant surgeon before losing his wife in surgery caused him to recommit his life to learning the mystic ways of his people. He eventually became Shaman, one of the original members of Alpha Flight. The source of his powers is a mystical pouch which contains anything he needs at any given time to perform his spells. He has been shown to be able to control plants as well as fire and the weather. He can also convene with spirits and animals, as well as project his astral form in a similar way as Doctor Strange. Shaman is incredibly smart, which makes him use these powers in really clever ways, making them even more effective. For example, when Guardian was almost murdered in X-Men Unlimited number 45, Shaman had the spirits of the air keep feeding air to the Guardian's brain so that they could preserve his brain functions until they could get him proper medical attention.